We're in a series called "You're Not the Boss of Me." We've talked about guilt. We've talked about envy. Today we're going to talk about something else because there's a lot of emotions that compete for our control in our lives. And I just wanted to do something today because something that I think that'll just make us uncomfortable, because that's why you came to church today, was to feel uncomfortable. Right? And so I want to talk a little bit about politics. Who wants to talk about Donald Trump? Maybe some, AOC. Maybe some, NRA or abortion or welfare or women's rights. Let's go. Let's get a healthy debate going on this morning, right now. Okay? No, talking about politics in church is about as uncomfortable as me going to a bar and say, "Hey, I want to talk to you about Jesus." Right? No one wants to talk about that kind of stuff. Why? Because it makes us uncomfortable. It makes us uncomfortable. I think it would be healthy. So what we're going to do is we're going to call up a couple people here, and we're just going to kind of riff. I have no idea what your background is or what your beliefs are, but I think it would be a healthy debate would be good. No. What's going to end up happening is that we will get frustrated, right? We'll get upset. Let's talk about something a little bit more tame. In fact, I actually asked our team earlier today, I said, what makes you mad? What sets you off? It's a good, healthy discussion right before church. Let's talk about the things that really irritate you. And I got everything from my wife, my husband, my kids, Stan Kroenke. It was just all over the board. It was waiting at a turn when somebody's trying to turn right and they won't turn right, even though they have the right of way to turn right. Right? There's no sign that says no turn on red, but you're still waiting behind this car to turn right. It's all over the board. And in fact, we all deal with that to some degree, right? We deal with something called road rage. Right? Who deals with road rage? Everybody at some level deals with road rage, right? Road rage is crazy. Road rage is the behaviors. They include things that you know this because you do these things, right? Rude and offensive gestures, right? Anybody? No, we're not outing ourselves today. Don't raise your hands. Verbal insults, physical threats, dangerous driving methods targeted toward another driver, or, get this, a pedestrian. Have you ever done that? Have you ever been mad, had road rage at somebody who's walking across the street? Why are you walking there? You don't have the right of way. Right? We get irritated about that stuff. But they're targeted at another driver or pedestrian in an effort to intimidate, or for us, just a release of frustration. I don't know if you've had this, because I've been in a car where road rage is kind of stirring up within me. I will verbally say something, and then my wife will say, they can't hear you, right? Right? That's it's just a release of frustration. Sometimes people will intimidate you, they're kind of tailgating you or bump. If it's a pedestrian, you're getting up as close as you can without actually hitting the person. It's, don't act like you haven't done it. All this is directed towards strangers. It's directed towards strangers. We don't even know these people. If we knew them, it would be funny. It wouldn't be road rage. It'd just be like a practical joke. But there's a stranger, so it's road rage. According to a study, it says, you'll find this interesting. People who customize their cars with bumper stickers and other adornments are more prone to road rage. So, and people who have a lot of bumper stickers and here's the thing, it doesn't have anything to do with what's actually on the bumper sticker. It's not like, there's a bumper sticker that doesn't say, guns don't kill people, I kill people, here, watch out. It's not that. It's the number of bumper stickers indicates the more rageful the person is on the road. I have no idea what this is all about, but here's what I do know. If that is true, the most road ragey people, or the ragiest people, however you want to say that, marathon runners. Marathon runners. Have you seen these people? They have all kinds of bumper stickers on there. Could you imagine a family of marathon runners? I run a 5K, run a 10K, run 13.2, 26.2, all kinds of different things. Man, if I'm behind one of those people, I know, do not get in their way. They are very road ragey, according to this study. While a percentage of us have experienced road rage, all of us have experienced rage or anger in some some sense of the word. It's either internal or it's external. But we don't call it rage, or we don't call it anger. We call it frustration, right? I'm just frustrated. Just frustrated when we feel something is wrong, and I'm just responding to the wrong that I see. It's not me. I'm not angry. I'm just frustrated. I'm just irritated. It's just a pet peeve of mine. Frustration is actually anger. It actually is anger. What's the difference between frustration and anger? While you mull that over, while you kind of come up with a response, let me catch you kind of up. We're in this middle of this series, right? You're not the boss of me. How to say no to emotions that compete for our control. And Jesus said it's the stuff that comes out of us that has the potential to ruin us. Not the stuff that's inside, not the stuff that kind of we put in, but the stuff that kind of is already within us, kind of boiling in, stirring us up, and it comes out of us. That has the most potential to ruin us. And these are the things that come from our hearts. We find this in Matthew chapter 15. Jesus is giving this teaching, and he says this in Matthew 15, verse 18. The things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart. He starts with this. He says, don't you see that whatever enters the body just kind of goes right through goes through the stomach and then right out of the body. But the things that come out of a person's mouth come from their heart, and these are the things that defile them. These are the things that ruin them. This is where the most potential for destruction is. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, he says. Thoughts like murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. That's Matthew's account. Mark's account adds like 5 or 6 more to this. And it's like these are the things that kind of are in us. And when we take back, we're like, whoa, wait a minute. I don't really want to murder anybody. I just want to intimidate them, think that I'm going to run them over, and then I'll be okay. No, the evil thoughts are within us. They're within us. These are things that have the potential to ruin us. And in this series, we're learning how to monitor our hearts and our emotions. Because when our emotions take control, things get out of control. When our emotions take control, things get out of control. It can get that way, whether it's guilt or envy or insecurity or fear that takes control. And today, guess what we're talking about? Anger. I wish somebody would have said politics. Politics, no. Anger. Nobody wants anger to be the boss of them. Like, you've never met anybody that says, you know what? I really enjoy getting angry. I really want anger just to kind of run my life. I love it. I love it. I love the feeling I get when I have incredible hawkism, and I just let anger ruin my life. Nobody wants anger to be the boss of you. The people closest to you don't want anger to be the boss of you, right? The people closest to you don't want anger to be the boss of you, and we've seen that. You've probably seen that. You've been on both sides of this. You've been probably the one that's been angry before, and you've probably been on the other side where someone has been angry towards you, and you've experienced that as well. You're like, man, I wish anger wasn't the boss of you right now. That would make me feel a whole lot better. And we're not just talking about extroverted anger that you kind of like, that manifests itself out. Like we know kind of road rage is an extroverted anger. It's an anger that really boils up and it erupts out. Most of the time in those rude gestures or those physical threats or verbal assaults or things like that. But sometimes extroverted anger, you may never raise your voice or lose your temper, but you're still scary. Have you met those people? Those are scary people. They never raise their voice, they never lose their temper, but they're still scary. Do not mess with that person. Your moodiness and your silence are controlling you. And whether you shut people out or you shut people down, it is the boss of you. That emotion has taken over control. And when emotions take control, things get out of control. It can be extroverted anger. I think it could all be something called righteous anger. Righteous anger. Some people call this crusader anger. I think it's righteous anger is probably a better term for this. This type of anger actually stirs people to really fight injustice or evil, right? It has led to some remarkable movements, great things, civil rights movement, suffrage, child labor laws, things like that. There's many more examples of righteous anger. Righteous anger stands in the contrast to the anger that we're talking about today. Because righteous anger reflects concerns over what others aren't getting that they deserve. That's righteous anger. What are others not getting that they deserve? Do not have rights. Do not have, or there's something kind of forced against them that they deserve better than that. That's kind of righteous anger, and we're gonna that's not the anger we're talking about today. That we're talking about a different kind of anger. The anger that most often controls us or affects us in our lives is anger that says, what I'm not getting that I'm sure I deserve. That's different, right? Our anger, our rage, our frustration is sourced in, anger that what I'm not getting that I'm pretty sure I deserve. I'm not getting that thing that I deserve. Maybe I'm getting something that I know I don't deserve. That could be an anger. But basically you can turn that, what I'm not getting that I think that I deserve. I'm not getting the kind of pay that I think that I deserve, so I'm going to be angry. I'm not getting the kind of treatment that I deserve as a customer, so I'm going to get angry. This is a fast food joint, and I've been waiting in this line for 20 minutes. I deserve my food now, and I have a right to get angry. That happened to me yesterday. It's bad. Breadco, man. Breadco on a Saturday morning. It was hard. It was a hard day. It was a hard deal. Testing my patience. That's right. Let's look at what James says. I think that's probably a good place to go. James had a lot to say about this that was really helpful. James, if you don't know, is the brother of Jesus, and that's pretty a hard thing to be. To be the brother of Jesus. In fact, we don't hear anything about James until the book of Acts. So all the time, the 33 years that Jesus was on this earth, kind of alive and in human form before his death and resurrection and ascension to heaven, we never hear anything about James. Probably because he's living in his brother's shadow, right? Like, James, how come you're not as good as Jesus? That kind of thing. Right? I don't know if you have a sibling like that, but it can be a problem. But James was an influential member in the early church. He was a big deal. In fact, they came to him for wisdom and advice and counsel, and he was part of the Jerusalem council when they were seeing people come to faith, people come to belief in Jesus in the thousands. And they started seeing Jewish people convert to the way, they called it. And they started seeing Gentile people start to say, no, I believe that Jesus is the Son of God and that he died and he rose again. I want to follow him. And they started having all these things. And so we first see James in this kind of environment. Now, how do we bring the two groups together? And then we see this epistle that's written by James. And this is what he says. As one of the leaders of the early church, James says this. This is in the third chapter of James. He says, or fourth chapter of James, who is wise and understanding among you? Who is wise and understanding among you? That's a good question to ask. A wise person has insight, right? A wise person understands that life is connected and it keeps things in perspective. Who is wise and understanding among you? And he goes on and says, let them show it by their good life. Let them show their wisdom and their understanding by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. That's such a great statement that we're like, oh, that's beautiful. That's poetry. That's not realistic. No, it is realistic, right? Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds, by actually doing something that comes from the wisdom within them. Wise people are always humble. Wise people are humble people. Wisdom leads to humility. Arrogance doesn't make a lot of sense. It's irrational. It's all over the place. We see it like it can seem attractive. It can seem like it's powerful. It can seem influential, but it will crumble. Pride comes before fall, right? But in humility, humble people are lifted up. Humility kind of rises to the top. Humility is powerful, but it's not natural. Humility is powerful, but it's not natural. He goes on to say, but if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, if that is what's within you, and we know what Jesus said, that's what's within you is going to come out of you. It's where what's in your heart is going to come out. It's there's evilness there. If we don't really flush it out, if we don't really say no to those emotions that compete for our control, but if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, if you let that stuff live down there unaddressed, it's going to be a problem. It says, do not boast about it or deny the truth. James is saying, don't get stuck and satisfied. Don't get stuck and satisfied. Don't pretend to be fine. God has called you to something better. God has called you to something better. He explains it further. For if you have bitter envy and selfish ambition, when it's internal and rooted in the heart, there you find disorder and every evil practice. When arrogance gets lodged in your heart, there's going to be disorder. There's going to be disorder. There's going to be disorganization. It's the root of every evil practice. It's going to be there. It's going to harbor that. And what's on the inside is coming for you and for those around you. James tells us how to keep anger from lodging in our hearts and how to keep it from becoming the boss of us. And he pauses. And then he asks this question. What causes fights and quarrels among you? What is it that causes fights and quarrels among you? Where does the hostility and the conflict come from? Where does it come from? Our response is, no, James, it's not what causes, it's who causes, right? It's my mom. It's my boss. It's my 9-year-old son. I don't know. It's a who causes my anger. These people in my life, they're driving me nuts. As long as you think it's a who, you will never get to the real what. James saying, what causes quarrels and fights among you? As long as you are personifying it, as long as you're putting a who behind it, as long as you're saying it as a who, you will never uncover the real answer to that question. It's a what. You will never uncover the real what. He goes on and says, don't they come from your desires that bottle within you? In other words, Jesus already said this. I'm just reiterating it. James is saying, what causes quarrels and fights among you? Doesn't it come from the things that you bottle up on the inside? Doesn't it come from the things that are already within you? And we push back, say, no, they don't come from me at all. The real reason I struggle is because of his inability to do this or her. Why is she always doing that? Why don't they see things my way? My way is the right way. James is saying, as long as you think that the source is out there, you're never going to deal with it. As long as you think the source is somebody else, it's them, it's always them. They're the ones that are pushing my buttons. They're the ones that are setting me off. They're the reason that I'm getting angry. As long as you think that the source is outside, you're never really going to deal with it. You're never going to deal with it. As long as you think it's a who and you'll never get to the real what. And this is life-changing insight, because in any relationship, if both parties embrace this concept, anger will never be the boss of you. Anger will never be the boss of you. If both parties can embrace this, anger will never be the boss of you. Let's read that verse again. Don't they come from the desires that bottle within you? The answer is yes, they do. Every single time. We fight and we quarrel because we're not getting something that we want or that we desire. We are angry because it's not the response that we want or we desire, or we're not getting what we want or what we desire. Our typical responses are, but I earned it. Right. You're not getting what you want or you desired, so you're angry. Maybe you did earn it. Maybe you're not getting what you feel like you earned. and you're angry. It's because it's coming within you, though. You're not getting what you want or what you desired. Maybe you said this before, but they promised me, right? They promised. Okay, again, they promised. They didn't come through on their promise, but guess why you're angry? You may think that you're angry at them, but what you're really angry is that you didn't get what you were promised. You didn't get what you thought you deserved or what you wanted or what you desired. But what they did wasn't fair. Sometimes we say that. And you want to be treated fairly, and you want to be treated, equally, and you weren't. And you're not getting what you wanted. And if you can pause in the moment when the anger is rising to acknowledge this and recognize that, that part of the problem, I'm not saying all the problem or all the reasons or all the reasons why things are boiling up in your life is in you, but part of the problem is the fact that it's you. It's what's going on within you. If you recognize that, if you realize that and you address that and you deal with it, it's so liberating. It's so freeing. So freeing. He says, what causes quarrels and fights among you? Don't they come from the evil desires that war within you? Don't they come from those things that are kind of bottled up within you? The next verse, James says, you desire, but you do not have, so you kill. Of course, we read that and we're like, easy. I'm not going to kill anybody. I just want what I want. If they give me what I want, it'll be okay. His point is this: if we don't recognize that the source of our anger is in here, not out there, we have the potential to take things to an unhealthy level and even destructive extremes. What's behind murder? Somebody wanted something. Somebody wanted something. That's why they killed. So you want and you do not have, so you kill. Somebody wanted something. Another translation of this verse says, you are envious and you cannot obtain, so you fight and you quarrel. The source of our anger isn't out there, it's in here. We aren't getting our way. We aren't getting something we want. I want what I deserve and what I was promised. Should you be upset? Sometimes. When you own your slice of the argument pie, though, it brings the temperature way down. It calms it way down, right? In the middle of an argument, hey, just announce it. This will be the weirdest thing. It'll stop the argument right there, right? But in the middle of an argument, just announce it. You know what? Part of the problem is, I'm not getting what I want. People will be like, what? You're right, you're not getting it. No, it could go ahead. Just announce it. Here's the question I would ask to you. What's your relationship with anger? What's your relationship with anger? Do you let it become the boss of you? Does it get to boss you around? Does it get to control your mouth or your mood? I mean, are you ready to put an end to that? What's your relationship with anger? Does it have control in your life at times? Not all the time. But does it have control when you feel boiling up? Does it take over and things kind of get out of control? After that, do you have moments of regret or moments you're going like, you know what? Probably shouldn't have said that. Probably shouldn't have acted out that way, or that was a little over the line. Like, those are the moments of quiet, reflective honesty that usually happens in private. But that's an indicator of what is actually pouring out of you, the things that are within you. If you ever said, I don't know where that came from, it came from in you. That's not the type of person that you know that I am. It's not the type of person that you show all the time, but it's in you. It's in all of us. It's in all of us. You have to humble yourself and face the difficult fact that part of the problem is that you're not getting your own way. When you feel it rising up, you have to be able to verbalize or think or just say, hey, anger, you're not going to be the boss of me. I'm going to say no. I'm going to put my foot down. You're not going to be able to control the things that are coming out. I'm on to you. You want me to think it's all them. It's not. Part of the problem is I'm not getting what I want. I'm owning my piece of the pie. Besides, if you're a Jesus follower, we already have a better boss than anger. Why would you want anger to be the boss of you when you're following Jesus? And Jesus is a boss that didn't get his way all the time either, right? He didn't always get his way. You have a boss who said no to what he wanted so that we could get what we needed most. In fact, Paul said this about Jesus. Paul, one of the most influential people in the early church, started churches all across the Mediterranean rim, and he wrote letters to all these different churches that he had started. He would start one, and he would go out and start another one, and he would encourage them all the time. And he wrote a letter to the church in Philippi, and he was just talking about Jesus. This is what he said about Jesus. He said this in Philippians chapter 2. Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Think about that. I know a lot of people, in fact, I know that I would be tempted to be like, do you know who I am? When I didn't get my way. Do you know who you're talking to? Do you know the power that I have? But Jesus, who by his very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage, but rather he made himself nothing by taking on the very nature of a servant. This is the logic behind the instructions that Paul gives immediately before these verses. Immediately before these verses, this is kind of his logic. This is his explanation of what you should do, because this is what he says in verse 5. He says, in your relationships with one another, with your father, your mother, your boss, your neighbor, your roommate, the stranger you're about to hit on the street corner, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset of Christ Jesus, who, being the very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage, but actually considered himself nothing and took on the very nature of a servant. In that same way, in your relationships with one another, have that same mindset. It's okay not to get everything that we want. It's okay not to get everything that we think that we deserve. In fact, it's probably better that we don't get everything we want. Jordan wants sugar all the time. I like sugar, he says. I bet you do. Trick or treat's gonna be a mess in the house. It's probably good that we don't get everything that we want all the time. If that's what it takes to keep anger from being the boss of us. One reason that following Jesus will make your life better and make you better at life is that it nudges us away from some of these selfish ambitions, some of these bitter envies in our life, some of the self-centeredness and the arrogance towards others. It kind of nudges us away from that into being more other-centered, nudges us into the direction of humility, nudges us in saying, hey, maybe be more like Jesus. That's something that's easy to say. It's a little bit more difficult to put into practice, right? But the results in a bigger and better life, one in which anger is not the boss of you. And that's good. Because nobody wants anger to be the boss of them. And the people closest to you don't want anger to be the boss of you either. When emotions take control, things get out of control. And anger is something that can manifest itself loudly and explosive and can damage relationships almost faster than anything else can. It can also manifest itself quietly and silently and then you never lose your temper, but you've shut people out and you shut people down. And what's stirring on the inside has made you so angry that you know what? I'm not going to have anything to do with them ever again. And you're like, you know what? I did pretty well. I didn't yell at them. I wanted to, but I didn't yell at them. Don't let anger be the boss of you. We have to learn to say no to that emotion that really, really competes